Welcome to episode 11 of Ed's Not Dead. I'm Robbie Dodd. I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. C.H. Sidden.
What a day.
What a day.
What a day.
With some serious technology problems.
No, everything went great.
I know.
So good.
And Mr. Peter Crable. Hey, Crabes.
Hey, man.
How are you?
Chipper.
Good.
Chipper.
All right, well, we are glad to be back. Welcome to Ed's Not Dead. We have a big show for you tonight, right?
Yes, we do.
Epic.
Epic. Always epic.
We have the one and only Charlotte Danielson
Yes, we do.
on the program. And so we're going to talk to Charlotte about all things Danielson Framework.
What should people know about it? Just what's the 5-second synopsis of Charlotte Danielson?
Ooh, Charlotte Danielson.
Known for what?
Known for her teacher observation systems.
Yeah.
And her really bringing a common language to effective teaching behaviors.
There you go.
So
Used widely.
Used widely, yes. Maybe the most widely. So we are honored and excited to have Charlotte on the show. We hope you enjoyed our last episode with John Saphir, another giant in education over the last 40 years. So it's been big having those two.
Yeah.
We learned a lot. We hope you as listeners did too. So
Looking at a lot of ways that people look at teaching.
Yep.
That's really the theme of that one.
Absolutely. And the way those two have really had an influence on professionalizing teaching is, I think, part of their legacy.
Yeah.
And we are going to get into one of our favorite writers that we'd like to talk about, the Washington Post, Jay Matthews, and his latest piece on the disconnect between charters and public school unions. And
Let's get it.
Yeah, and that intersection in this article really happens in L.A. and what's been going on with teacher strikes. So thanks for joining us. You can find me at R.W. Dodd, Mr. Crabes,
At Peter Crable.
and Mr. Sids.
At CH Siddons. And we have a website.
Yep.
You need to log in and subscribe and get all the good stuff from there.
Yep. Log into that internet.
leave us a rating.
Yeah, please leave us a rating if you can.
Yep, and some show feedback.
And if you give qualitative show feedback, we'll read it.
It's about time Crable turns down the volume on the show. Dear Lord, Peter. That's why
I can hear all the breathing.
we need to hire a producer. Did anybody watch the Oscars?
No, not at all.
You millennials
No,
don't watch
no.
TV
You know why I
shows.
didn't watch it? Because there was no host.
I know. It was kind of disappointing. Tina Fey and Lisa
Lampanelli.
Poehler.
Amy Poehler.
Oh, Lisa Poehler.
Jeez.
And I can't remember the other very funny woman. She was from Bridesmaids.
Melissa McCarthy.
They're all on SNL.
No, not
They're
Melissa
all on
McCarthy.
Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
Amy Poehler.
Come on, give it to me.
So what did they do? They all just kind of...
They
They
did.
just came
They-
out and presented it.
They did. They were very funny. They were the closest thing
To a
to
host.
hosts for
Nice.
for a segment. They were good. And don't forget about at Ed's Not Dead PC.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a thing.
All right,
That's the
and
thing.
as always, folks, we are brought to you by Pulp Education, a full-service educational media company specializing in leadership, instruction, and 21st century school reform, and all cool things ed.
That's great. We
All
do
right.
all that.
Show feedback.
We have no feedback to share right now.
That's a little bit of a shame.
It was a quick turnaround.
It was a
Okay.
quick turnaround from 4 days ago.
All right.
Don't go behind the scenes about when we're recording this.
All right. So, did you read this article by Jay Matthews titled "From the Picket Line to the Charter School: The Path Union Members Should Walk"? Mr. Crabes, did you read it?
Yeah, for the most part.
Okay. Mr. Sids?
I did.
Okay.
I annotated it.
So basically what Mr. Matthews is contending here is that the energy that's spent by public school unions, in this case California with the recent strike in LA Unified, the energy that they put into demonizing the expansion of charter schools in Los Angeles and beyond as money grubbing for-profit organizations is not fair and, more importantly, not accurate. He contends that many charters are in it for the right reasons,
Right.
and most charters are not-for-profit organizations.
Yep.
And that they're really interested in improving education and educational outcomes for kids. And he's imploring unions to try to put their differences aside, at least in my way of thinking, and open their mind to what charters might have to offer.
Yeah.
He's all for ineffective charters or charters that do not serve kids well to them being closed. But he kind of says what I've said all along, which is that
There's enough food at the table.
enough food at the proverbial education table. So
Right.
this is my question to you guys: is Jay Matthews living in reality? Is there enough food at the table for unions and an ever-growing charter footprint to coexist?
I would say yes, especially in Los Angeles. The data that I searched up, charter school data, it's a little biased because it's from the charter school organization or association in Los Angeles. There's 282 charter schools. There's 150,000 students enrolled in charter schools alone. And then the demographics of the student body of LA charter schools very closely mimic what you find in the public schools. However, there are some caveats, and I will give them to you right now. And I searched up a little further from data from 2010, 2011. The charter school population in Los Angeles differs from the public schools. The schools themselves are about half as large.
Okay.
So that's one thing, just a scale of size.
School size, right?
Right, school size. Charter schools have slightly smaller proportions of Asian students and students in poverty than the other public schools. The proportion of Hispanics enrolled in charter schools is substantially smaller. Conversely, charter schools have larger proportions of black and white students than are found in the district and the public school and feeder populations. So the data coming from charter schools...
they're disproportionately African American and Caucasian?
I wouldn't say they're disproportionately. There's more students who are African American.
But the Hispanic population is the largest population in LA Unified.
Right. And one of the things that Jay Matthews says in his article that he touts as research, or the data from this Stanford research project, was that in 2014, 48% of Los Angeles charters performed significantly better in reading than traditional public schools.
I know that one got you going.
Yeah. And then 44% significantly better in math. So reading and math, they perform better. But then we look at the data as to how many kids are enrolled in charter schools versus public schools, and we have less kids who are enrolled. The schools are smaller, so you have a maybe a more manageable size of classes or just a manageable size of population. And then finally...
So other factors that could be improving test scores,
Right.
other than just the charter itself.
And then two other pieces. One is the data for charter schools. There's 7% of charter students in charter schools are special education students, as opposed to 11% in public schools. So not a significant difference, but still different.
How about ESL?
In public schools, 30%. In charters, 21%.
Okay.
Students in poverty, in the public schools, it's 75%. In charters, it's 70%. So, certainly not, I wouldn't say disproportionately, but they do have a smaller population of the students that may require more services, or
It's what they call educational load. They have a lower educational load.
I would agree.
In the business, that's what they
I don't know how significant that is in terms of numbers, raw numbers of students, but it's there.
And that's is depending on the state. I think that can vary widely, because that's certainly some places we've heard about criticism. Maybe in Indiana, I've read about somewhere. This was like a year ago, where they were able to essentially discriminate and be like, oh, we would, student with XYZ special needs, but we don't have the facilities, to accommodate
Right.
you. So in some ways they are able to. And, as you're talking, one of the things that always, and I don't know, maybe I just haven't seen it, but that I do question, and, I think I've typically come down on the side of, regulation for charters within reason and in a highly regulated environment seems okay. But I do wonder about any underlying, whether they're implicit or explicit, equity issues.
Right.
About how it affects the kids that are left behind that don't go to charter schools. And if it in fact makes their educational experience worse. And again, I don't know if there's any data on that or not, but that is always a big question that I have.
Yeah, and I mean, Matthew says, how can you dare to deny parents the right to have their kids have access to something that's working? And that's kind of what he says here. I mean, and that's what he says the unions are trying to do.
Well, I think the language of that I have a little bit of a problem with. School choice is not some inalienable constitutional right. Which when he says something like that, that's what makes how dare you deny parents the choice. And we've had neighborhood schools for hundreds of years. Well, really, let's just say 100 years.
100 years,
yeah. But it's a vastly new thing,
right?
To have
the quote that stuck out to me was, "Then as now, parents were taking their children elsewhere because many urban schools were not giving them the time, encouragement, and stimulation they needed." I think that's a very disparaging quote as to what the urban schools were or were not. I'm saying urban schools. Those particular schools are providing or not providing. And it troubles me that we scapegoat certain schools that for years and years and years were not given resources that they deserved. And because of redlining or housing patterns or poor public policy on the behalf of state and federal governments, that they are now being nicked and getting students populations taken away from their particular schools.
Yeah, and going back to when we spoke with Kathy Hoffman weeks or a month ago, and we asked her about their voucher system, she said, we need to get real and fully fund our public schools before we start looking at solutions. So in that sense, it's like, I don't know. Maybe I don't think we really have necessarily fully funded our public schools to say when you put the right resources and the appropriate amount of resources, whether it's money, whether it's people, whether it's counselors, whether it's nurses, whether it's whatever, all those things taken in combination, then let's see what schools can do.
Yeah. Well, and what he doesn't mention in here, he doesn't mention what we've talked about on prior shows, which is Proposition 13. He doesn't mention that systematically California undermined its own ability to provide quality public schools by
capping the amount of taxes they could collect.
By their own legislation.
But then allowing more wealthy districts to charge more.
Right. Absolutely.
In local taxes.
Yeah, and then you could argue that if over the years, if the cost of if California had kept up with the nation in funding public ed, we might not be having this conversation about the inroads charters have made, although they have made significant inroads across the country in most major urban settings.
Yeah. I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, they really have in pretty much every city. Yeah. And one side point, I guess. So Alex Caputo Pearl, who is the union's president, quotes and says, "The unsustainable, destructive practice of unregulated charter school growth." So I says to myself, is that true? Is it an unregulated, just sort of free-for-all in California? So one of the things that I looked at was how many schools.
You guys did a lot of research. You're such a nerd.
I literally did that while Casey was talking.
Right. That's why you pointed to him when I asked the first question? Okay, go ahead.
So just in LA itself, it looks like there was one charter school revocation. Is that the right word?
Yeah, revocation.
Yes, their charter was revoked last year. And several others, it looks like they never opened or no longer operating as a charter. So I don't know if that means then they're a pay school or whatever. But so that is something food for thought. I don't know what the appropriate number of schools closing is though, but one seems like not a lot. And then on the flip side, in terms of how many charter schools were opened last year, the number is 1,300 new and expanded charter schools. Ooh. However, of that 1,300, they count if a school were to go from a K to 5 and add a 6 to 8, that counts in there. If they were to double their enrollment and their capacity, that essentially counts as a new school. So of those, the equivalent of 70 new schools across the state, but then another 1,200 plus expanding their programs. So that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
And I guess that's a lot, but is that a problem if there's somewhere between 70 and 1,300, depending on how you look at it, schools opening and only one, at least in LA, closing?
And Mr. Caputo Pearl, I mean, I think what Jay's also saying are words and phrases like the unsustainable, destructive practice of unregulated charter growth. I mean, those are strong words.
Yeah.
Yes.
And those are fighting words.
Yeah, but I mean, that's as the president of the teachers union, you kind of have to
Yeah, you
use
do.
those.
You got to come strong.
What is the impact on? What do you perceive as the impact on teachers in terms of they're not allowed to join unions?
Yeah.
Right. For the most part, in charter schools.
Yeah. They work like dogs.
Where does
they
it-
sign on to that?
Where does that come from, though, that they
do.
can't join unions? Is that part of the charter?
I don't know that.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I'll look it up.
Yeah.
I mean, if they just decided to
See, I guess the question,
organize, could they join a
I
union?
guess the question that I have, and it kind of gets back to our Rahm Emanuel discussion in episode 10. If you've missed it, episode 10 of Ed's Not Dead, the Rama Culpa.
Robert, do you like that?
Yeah, I
That's
like
good.
that. That was good. Where we wrestled with that idea of autonomy at the school level, especially as it relates to leadership of schools, the principalship. I mean, I'm just always curious educationally, programmatically, organizationally.
Yeah.
So public schools are big. And when I say big, I mean they are, contrary to our friend Secretary DeVos, they are a system. And there are lots of them. Like, let's take LA Unified, lots of schools. They're very stable. But unfortunately, they don't change much. That's the negative byproduct of having a large, stable system. Is that
Any large, stable system.
Correct. Is you don't think change doesn't come fast
Right.
or furious. And here you have charters, which if you can survive in a vicious environment, right? Because it's not an easy marketplace. You can go out of business. It can go south for a lot of reasons. But if you can survive, you may have a level of nimbleness that you wouldn't have in public schools, and maybe you can do some innovative things. So I'm always balancing those things.
Right.
Is one better than the other? Public schools provide something that I would argue has been part of the bedrock of the country.
Yes.
But at the same time, there's a reason why charters have developed.
Right.
It didn't happen by accident.
Yeah.
They were a response to something in the environment.
Yeah.
And they're here.
And so, an update to
Mr.
the
Craig's
Janus
questions.
decision.
Janus.
Yeah.
Janus.
Yeah.
Janus.
So I did a quick search about on EdWeek. There was an article that we can talk about in a future show. About a quarter of all Chicago charter schools have been unionized, compared to 11% nationally. And it's worth noting that charter organization may not be a strategy other state and local unions choose to pursue. There are about 3.1 million public school teachers. There are only about 219,000 charter school teachers. And only about 4% of teachers in Chicago who are part of the CTU, the Chicago Teachers Union members, work at a charter school. The majority of, in terms of unionizing charter schools, which you'll have single sites or a small amount of schools, requires a lot of work and doesn't necessarily bring back the big returns.
Can I ask you a tricky question?
Oh, tricky question.
And then we're up against our break. But let's maybe end with this.
I have a quiz for you, by the way.
Is
Red light challenge.
Is a Catholic school teacher a teacher?
Or are they a... Oh, never mind.
Are they a teacher?
Yeah.
Is a charter school teacher a teacher?
Yes.
Is a public school teacher a teacher?
Yes.
Are the first two any less of what you would consider a teacher than a public school teacher?
No.
Okay.
But I'm gonna.
I think there's that-
disagree on the.
You
pretense
took
of your
my
question.
strategy where I make you answer what I want.
That's so good.
But I'm gonna disagree on the premise of
That's
the
the
question.
Sean Hannity strategy.
I'm going to disagree on the premise of the question because the whole point of teacher unions is to support those within the public school system.
I'm not
public school funding. Right?
This is not a union question. When I thought of it, unlike Crable, who's evil, I didn't have that intention. I do think, though, for those of us that are born and raised public school teachers,
Yeah.
we can't deny that we look at teachers in other kinds of schools and potentially wonder, are they really a teacher like I'm a teacher?
I would argue that.
Would you agree with that, Mr. Krabs, at all?
No, I think I would look at private schools and religious schools differently in terms of where they get their money from, the type of student that they're working with, perhaps.
Are they teachers?
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about charter. I would look at charter school teachers as those who would benefit greatly from being unionized. and ensuring that their rights are going to be, and their contractual rights are upheld by the powers that be.
All right.
Let me ask, before we go, one question. Because
It's really hard for me to think of a head of school as a principal.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that's a terrible bias that I have, but I think does a head of a private school really do what I do as a principal?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
They don't have to let every kid in.
Yeah, but does that make them somehow less of a leader or less of a teacher?
No, it's different.
All right, so let me ask
Kids are
my
kids.
question. All right, one of the things in this article,
You don't get a question. We're going to break.
no, I get a question.
No, he gets a
Go
question.
make it fast.
All right, it has to do
Jeez.
with
She's a look.
the characterization of those that open charter schools
Yeah.
as greedy billionaires, and that billionaires have their own narrow education agenda to divert money out of our public schools and into their corporate charter schools. Do you all agree with that or disagree with that? Are most that
I would have
open-
to see who,
That is-
what the companies are. I mean,
That's-
the nonprofits, the not-for-profits, I have less of a problem with than the ones that are
That's ridiculous.
completely profiting off of.
Okay, yeah, it's fun to see what you're
I
taking.
mean, that is a small percentage of those that get into this, I think.
I'd
would
have to
think-
see the
yes,
list.
I
I'd have
would
to
think
see
so
the
too.
list.
And I think that's the fringe. That
Right.
would be
There are
my-
some that are.
Yeah, there are some.
I think
no
there are.
question.
I think a majority of charter schools, I would imagine, are trying to just improve the education that students are getting in public schools, and that they didn't get when maybe they were public school teachers or principals, and they weren't allowed to innovate, and they weren't allowed because of bureaucracy or whatever, not allowed to do X, Y, or Z.
I mean, why did Bill Gates get into education?
Yeah, because anybody can be a teacher.
Well,
anybody
well,
can
'Cause he
figure
has,
out.
he has a bootload of money,
Right,
that
and he thought he could make a
whatever.
difference.
Yeah,
Well,
but
no, he
anybody
thought he could make a difference.
Anybody
Yeah.
can be a teacher is the idea that anybody can do education. That's why Bill Gates got into it. I can fix it.
Now he's going back to just curing diseases. In
I went
third
to
world countries.
school. I understand it.
I have money.
Yeah.
He dropped out of school though.
All right, folks. The article is From the Picket Line to the Charter School, the Path Union Members Should Walk. It's by Jay Matthews. It is in the Washington Post, February 17th. All right, boys. Folks, don't go away. We'll be right back with our big interview. Thanks. All right, fellas, we are thrilled to have the great Charlotte Danielson on Ed's Not Dead. Miss Danielson is an educational consultant based in Princeton, New Jersey. She's taught at all levels, from kindergarten through college, and has worked as an administrator, a curriculum director, and a staff developer. In her consulting work, Miss Danielson has specialized in aspects of teacher quality and evaluation, curriculum planning, performance assessment, and professional development. In addition, she has served as a consultant to hundreds of districts, universities, intermediate agencies, and state departments of education in virtually every state and in many other countries. This work has ranged from the training of practitioners in aspects of instruction and assessment, the design of instruments and procedures for teacher evaluation, to keynote presentations at major conferences. She has a rich and varied educational background. She holds a BA in history from Cornell and advanced degrees in philosophy, economics, and educational administration. Do the two of you feel inadequate yet already?
A little bit.
We got a long way to go. Long way to go.
All right, from Oxford and Rutgers University. Charlotte, it is amazing to have you on the show. Thanks for agreeing to join Ed's Not Dead.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here. And let me just correct one thing.
Okay, shoot.
About in the bio.
Yep.
I'm no longer in Princeton. I've moved to San Francisco.
Oh,
Ooh.
And I have to say I'm enjoying a nice warm weather here compared to what you all got, I think.
that is correct. We are jealous. That's great. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you. Well,
It's only taken me 3 years to become a complete weather wimp.
yeah. Well, it's that you can't find many better places to live in the United States than San
No,
Francisco.
it's a great place.
Yeah, that's great. All right, are you ready to jump in?
Sure.
Okay.
Anytime.
So your work has had a big impact on us as practitioners. Your framework for teaching has been adopted by countless districts nationwide. Will you talk a little bit about the process that led you to developing it and why you think it's been so effective?
Sure. Well, let me. The way it came to be is a bit of a story, and I hope this isn't too long.
No, go,
and
shoot.
You can always cut it.
Yep.
But I was working at Educational Testing Service for some time, and I was developing for them some products in some programs for teacher professional development in teaching for thinking, actually, and it was very interesting work. But while I was in that work,
can you give us a decade? When was that?
Oh, good question. 80s.
80s. Okay.
Mid 80s.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
And they at that point had decided to revise their what was known at the time as the National Teacher Exam, and was revised to become what is now known as Praxis.
Oh.
There are 3 levels of the Praxis test for teacher licensing, actually, for new teacher licensing. And the first level was very rudimentary. It was reading and writing, basic skills. The second level, Praxis 2, was, and still is, I think, teacher content knowledge about what it is they're going to teach. Like, do they know chemistry? And some general sort of book knowledge about teaching. But Praxis 3 was designed to be a performance assessment of teaching. That is, it was designed to answer the question, not only do you know chemistry, but can you teach chemistry?
Mm-hmm.
And the way they decided to assess that was to send trained assessors into teachers' classrooms in their first semester of teaching and to make a judgment as to the quality of the teaching. And they hired me, God knows why, but to design the training program for the assessors, for the observers.
Oh.
So I thought, well, that sounds like fun. And what I didn't realize was how hard it was. Of course, you never know when you get started on something like that how hard it's going to be. So I jumped into that, and I designed a training program for the observers. And it was really important that these people not only observe, but do so accurately. And so if the two of us went in to observe, we would agree on what we saw there and that it was up to standard and so on. So in order to do that, you had to be clear about what you were looking for and what it looked like when it was well done and things like that. So all the things that we now know are part of ordinary teacher evaluation, but it was relatively new at that point. But what happened when I did that was that, we got feedback from the people in the training, and we got this sort of amazing, surprising to me feedback from participants. And they would say things like, and when they would write their little feedback forms, they'd say, this was so valuable. They say, I've become a better teacher or a better principal or a better university faculty member because this is the first time I've had an opportunity to discuss good teaching with my colleagues. And I thought that was kind of sad, frankly, because I thought, well, what do you do on your staff in-service days? Not that. Well, apparently not that.
Go out to lunch.
Right. Well, whatever. And so that got me thinking that if this was valuable for the assessment of teaching practice for initial license, surely this would be valuable for all teachers, not just first-year teachers. Mm-hmm. And so I had the ideas, and I realized that we didn't have such a thing at the time. Now, I had come up with, when I was first teaching, Madeline Hunter was the rage.
Oh, yeah, Madeline Hunter, the scope and
remember
sequence.
Madeline Hunter?
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things we all learned from her, it was maybe 100 years ago now, that there is such a thing as a common language. And that's what everybody says now about my framework. It's given us a common language to talk about teaching. Yep. That doesn't seem like a big thing, but, it is, actually. It is a big thing. And so it occurred to me that if this is valuable for beginning teachers, it surely would be valuable for all teachers. So let's make a framework that is applicable to across the entire, the whole trajectory of the profession. Mm-hmm. So that's how the framework came to be. And so it was an outgrowth, in a way, of that work I had been part of at ETS. And here's one other interesting part of the story. At that time, before that time, nobody had used rubrics to define levels of performance in teaching.
Yeah.
It didn't exist.
No.
But I had been doing work in student assessment, and like everybody else in that field, I recognized that if you're going to evaluate, let's say, a student's writing sample, you have to have a rubric. it's not that they either do something or don't do it. They do it better or worse. They do it to some degree. And the question is, to what degree does somebody do this well? And then I thought, well, okay, teaching, that would be complex performance. And so if we need a rubric for student complex performance, surely we more so need it for teaching. And so that's what caused me to write the rubrics.
Yeah.
Was recognition that in order to understand this complex work, we better write rubrics and evaluate them. Yep. So that's where it came from, was recognizing that practitioners could really benefit from a clear definition of teaching and with rubrics to describe different levels of performance, that this would be a contribution, particularly to practitioners.
Yeah.
So that's where it came from.
Yeah. So you're clearly a pedagogical expert.
Savant.
So one of the more controversial initiatives in education in the last several years, decade or so, has been on teacher value-added measures. So I was just kind of curious if you have an opinion on it, one, and two, if you think it's good for either teachers or students.
Well, let's back up on that question a little bit. I assume you mean teacher value-added measures to evaluate the effectiveness of teaching.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, let's back up off of that question for a second. That is, I do believe that any school or school district has an obligation to ensure good teaching. I mean, a school or a district or a state, for that matter, has to be able to ensure quality teaching. Quality assurance is a critical element of a good school. And the principal or the superintendent or the commissioner of education, whoever it is, needs to be able to say to his or her public at any moment, everybody who teaches here is good. And here's how we know. We have a system. Now, there are two fundamental ways to establish that. One is based on teacher practices. Here's what they do. And the things that teachers do are the things that are associated with high level of student learning. The other approach is on outcomes, like direct measure of student outcomes based on teacher practice. I'm sorry, you can probably hear
Are you in trouble again?
In the background here. This is San Francisco, after all. So now, the value-added measures, I mean, if they were perfect, I would be fine with them. But let's be honest and acknowledge that they are not perfect. They are far from perfect. They build in all kinds of assumptions. First of all, they're built on assessments that themselves are limited in what they can assess. They're basically bubble tests.
Right.
And I think if we were all sitting around a table and thinking about our own children, let's say, and what do we want them to get out of school, it would be a lot of stuff that you cannot assess on a bubble test.
Right.
Period. Full stop. And so there's an issue there around just what is it that's assessed, and then there are all kinds of assumptions about value-added measures that, I mean, you can go to the psychometricians who know much more about this than I do and get all kinds of damning reports about why they are unreliable, invalid, and so you can maybe make the broadest judgments, but if I were I would never stake any important decision on those tests. Okay. I just don't think they hold up.
Yeah.
So
period.
So we, in a recent show, we had a discussion about an op-ed that Rahm Emanuel, the former mayor of Chicago, recently wrote in the Atlantic. And to summarize it, he's basically recently had an epiphany about the school reform efforts he led in Chicago. And one of the main insights that he's had about what they did in the city really focused on the role that principals play in teacher effectiveness. He went into school reform really focused on teacher accountability and kind of coercive accountability in some ways, and came out of it years later understanding that principals play a vital role. I'm curious, Charlotte, in your long career, how you've seen that evolve, the role of the principal in ensuring that teachers are effective, and where do you think we are now with it? What does a modern principal need to be able to do to ensure that teachers are effective?
Well, I guess I could ask you that same question. I'm talking to a couple of principals.
Yeah,
here, right?
yeah. So, yeah, you are, but you've been in a lot more schools than us.
Well, I've been in a lot of places, and I will say that my own view is that the principalship has become virtually an impossible job.
Oh.
I mean, I just think a lot of stuff has gotten loaded onto the principalship that it's impossible. I mean, it's not only a managerial job,
right,
which it's always been that. You've got to make sure the buses run on time and you get the budgets in and
right,
so on like that. And the attendance and, I mean, all the operational stuff has to work.
Right.
But then there's something called instructional leadership.
I know. That's what I was going to say. So do you believe in this idea of instructional leadership?
I'm just not sure that principals can do it on top of running a building.
Interesting.
I mean, I've read various, efforts by people to try to split the role of principal into manager and instructional leader.
Right.
And I've not ever really talked to anybody at length who's done it, but I would love to because I think it's got some real merit. So let me just say that I did write a book called Talk About Teaching.
Right.
Published by Corwin a few years ago.
Okay.
It's actually been in 2 editions now, and it's written for principals who are trying to be instructional leaders. And I have come to the view that in order to be an instructional leader, you have to first of all understand instruction and see that your job is to enhance the intellectual capacity of the school as a whole. Mm-hmm. That means of the teachers in the school,
right,
and their work with each other and their work with students. I've become a fan of using professional learning communities mm-hmm. as a vehicle for teacher learning and for teacher collaborative work,
right,
around what I think we would have to call problems of practice.
Right, that Richter 4 work that he did all those years ago.
Yeah. If you've got some 5th grade teachers working together,
right,
and they meet together on a Thursday afternoon, they say, what's coming up that we're not sure we know what to do? Well, let's look at some student work. Mm-hmm. Where are the obstacles? Where are the bottlenecks we're running into? And what should we do about it? And what could we do about it? And what's the knowledge, the expertise that we need that we don't have yet?
Uh-huh.
And so I think there's a real role for teacher leaders to be facilitators of that work.
Okay.
And that's not the job of every principal to go to every PLC meeting and lead that work. I think that's a job for teacher leaders. And it's really important, hard work. And it's different from teaching your 5th grade class, but it's more like that than it is making the bus schedule work.
Right. But is it fair to say, though, that most of the people over all these years that have implemented your great framework are principals, right?
Well, I mean, let's back up off of that a second.
Okay.
I mean, it's been used. I mean, as I wrote in the very first chapter of the first edition of the book 20-some years ago, it's a useful document for a lot of purposes. One is simply in teacher preparation.
Okay.
If this represents good teaching, are we teaching these students how to do this stuff?
Right.
Oh, okay. All right. And then if you're hiring, and I did do a book for ASCD outlining all these different applications of the framework. If you're recruiting and hiring teachers, well, how could you, if they submit a video, you could look at the video against the components of the framework. Or if you're doing a mentoring program, you could organize organize a mentoring program around those elements of teaching, and so on. You just go down the line, all the things that happen in the trajectory of a teacher's career. How can any of those activities be enhanced through having a clear and concise definition of what is good teaching? And yes, teacher evaluation is on that list, but it's sort of the end of the list, actually. It's much more important around PD, mentoring, coaching, etc.
Okay. As you're talking about the evaluation part, which is really a reactive approach to what some folks would call supporting teachers or providing a certain amount of support. What we were just talking about this just a little bit ago. What do you think post-secondary educations need to do to change in terms of how they prepare teacher candidates and how they send out the teachers they have ostensibly trained in the post-secondary environment to schools?
Well, I mean, it seems to me it's a pretty straightforward answer. Now, doing it is not so easy. But if the 22 components represent good teaching, if I were running a teacher prep program, the first question I would ask my faculty is, are we teaching this stuff?
Right.
And let's do a curriculum audit of what we're teaching. And I recognize, I mean, I've tried to do that a few places, and I have to say I've not had great success because...
What is the roadblock there?
The teacher prep world is a different world.
Right.
And I don't even want to get into that because I don't really understand it.
I just disparage it, and I don't understand it.
No, I don't want to disparage it. But I don't want to disparage it, but I recognize that we speak different languages, and they're worried about tenure, and they work to different drummers than I do.
Right.
But but that would, if I were in a rational world, that would be my question. Are we teaching these kids this stuff?
Right.
And then are the people who, when they do their clinical practice, are they working with teachers who understand that this is what good practice is? And when we have their supervisors who go out and observe them and give them feedback, either in the school or from the university, is this what they're looking for?
Right.
And having good conversations. I mean, it seems to me it's pretty straightforward how to teach people these skills, but you do have to have the infrastructure set up that will support that. One of the most fun little workshops I ever did once was in a town that had a college, and they put their student teachers in the school districts in that area, and they invited all these people on a Saturday, and people came on a Saturday, and it was the student teachers and their cooperating teachers and the university supervisors, and we did a little workshop on the framework for teaching, and it was the first time they had ever realized that they were actually speaking the same language, and that it was in all their interest to speak the same language and to offer these young teachers, these prospective teachers, meaningful feedback on doing this stuff well.
Right.
So it was not rocket science in terms of a model, but it seemed so straightforward, but it was very hard to pull off because you had to get these people to come in on a Saturday,
right,
etc. So, but I thought it was great. I loved it.
All right. Well, we're now at the point in the show, Charlotte, where we like to take a little bit of a risk, and we pass the baton to Casey, the Casey quiz. And so, are you willing to be a good sport? And if it all goes south, we'll just cut it all out.
Sure,
I don't let them cut it out.
But it might be fun.
I can be a risk taker.
Okay,
sure.
good. You've taken plenty of risk in your career. Okay, Casey, it's on you. Go.
All right, Charlotte. It's been truly a pleasure having you on the show and actually being able to talk to you in person. So thank you for coming on the show. You are certainly the most famous and important Charlotte in the teaching profession, I think. But
that's a low bar. That's a small.
But we want to check your understanding about the city of Charlotte, North Carolina. And I have three questions about this growing southern city. If you answer 2 out of the 3 correctly, you win a prize. And I don't know what that is yet.
Oh, boy. This sounds like Wait, Don't Tell Me.
That's where I stole it from.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
All right, you ready? Number
Sure.
1.
I mean, is one of them have to do with voter suppression?
Oh, wow. I didn't go that dark, but we could do an extra bonus one for that one. Number 1, the Charlotte metropolitan area is the largest metropolitan area in the U.S. without what? A, consultants. It's illegal to be hired as a consultant. B, zoos. They just don't seem to like animals. Or C, a Chick-fil-A.
I was going to say a baseball team, but I don't know. I have no idea. I'm sorry. No idea.
Take a guess.
Come on, pick one. Charlotte, you're a former test designer.
What are the choices again?
Consultants, zoos, or a Chick-fil-A?
I'm going to say a Chick-fil-A just because it's ridiculous.
Oh, that was well. Sorry, actually, it was zoos. They don't have a zoo.
Charlotte doesn't have a zoo.
They're 75 miles away from a zoo.
That just shows how enlightened they are.
That's true. That's exactly
That's
right. I agree with that. Anyway.
All right. Well, you have 2 more chances, and I have a bonus one just in case.
Okay.
Number 2.
Okay.
The city of Charlotte has a nickname, and it is what? A, the Queen City. B, the Hornet's Nest. Or C, Zootopia.
I'm going to say the Hornet's Nest.
That is correct. The Hornet's Nest.
Oh, nice.
Yes, okay.
That's right. That's right. Number 3. Charlotte is known as the capital of the world for what? A, and they're all cheeses. A, cream cheese. B, Limburger cheese. Or C, pimento cheese.
I don't know that one.
They seem all very unlikely, so I'm going to say pimento.
That is correct.
Oh, she passed.
Very good. Very good.
2 out of 3. All right.
I have a bonus one. If I didn't know this because I'm not a
Okay.
sports person, but maybe you do. You ready? Number
Yeah, go
4.
ahead.
The NFL's Carolina Panthers have played their home games in Charlotte since 1996. At present, they're the only team in the league that's owned by what? And this is an open-ended question.
Oh.
Yeah. Or owned by
I'm
whom?
Drawing a blank. I was going to, when I said baseball team, I had forgotten about the Panthers being a football team. Okay, I have no idea.
A former player.
Yes, that's right.
Oh.
That's
Ex-Baltimore Colts.
pretty interesting.
Jerry Richardson.
Jerry Richardson.
Who just passed away.
Did he?
Yes.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's almost as good as the Green Bay Packers being owned by the town.
That's
yeah,
right.
that's exactly right. You're right.
I
Well,
really like that.
Charlotte, thanks for playing along. And
You're welcome.
it has been an honor for Ed's Not Dead to have you on the show. Tell our listeners where they can find you. We know you say you're retired, but we know you're not really retired because I'm sure you're up to all kinds of things. But as far as electronically out there on the internet or your books,
Sure.
where do you want to point people?
Well, you can contact me through the Danielson Group.
Okay.
.org, and they will forward an email. And let me just mention one other thing, and because we didn't get into this, but I'm sorry we didn't. And that has to do with the framework for teaching being grounded in some assumptions about both students and teachers.
Right.
And I do think it's important for you to have this somewhere in this podcast.
Okay.
That anybody who's spent time with a 3-year-old knows that young children are just learning machines.
Right.
And that I have always viewed the job of teachers to be one of channeling that incredible energy for learning into, useful ends and into ways that will be useful to these kids as they get older. And that because students come to school and to education and to life with such incredible energy for learning, and it's very challenging to channel that energy, that the assumption about students is that they are natural and enthusiastic learners, and the assumption about teaching is that it's extraordinarily complex work, and that teachers make literally hundreds of decisions a day, often on incomplete information, and like in a hurry, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And Lee Shulman put that nicely a long time ago in an essay he wrote, that teaching is, he said after 30 years of doing this work, he's concluded that teaching is probably the most challenging, difficult, subtle, nuanced, and frightening activity he had ever encountered.
Yeah.
And he said it's more demanding than a doctor would encounter in an emergency room in a hospital.
Yeah.
And I believe that because it is extremely demanding, and yet we also have to take that with a grain of salt, because if you think of the work that doctors do, no doubt it's demanding. But, doctors see their patients one at a time.
Right.
Now, in schools, we would call that tutoring.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, it's granted. I mean, medical work is demanding work, and it's complex, etc. But, it's not 28 patients all at once.
Yep.
So I think we should not overlook the fact that teaching is it's complex intellectually and it's complex in a practical way, and that's part of what supporting teaching entails, is to make that work. So I have enormous respect and sympathy and admiration for people, for individuals who can do this work year after year after year
right.
with such commitment to it, and I admire that tremendously. So I'll just leave with that and say thank you to all you teachers to do this great work.
Yeah. Well, that's a great way to end, Charlotte.
Absolutely.
It's an honor
Okay.
it's an honor to have you on Ed's Not Dead. On behalf of Casey and Peter, thanks for coming on the show. Enjoy San Francisco, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon. All the best.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was pretty incredible having Charlotte Danielson on the show.
Yeah.
Another heavy hitter.
Yeah, I've only read about her for years, and I've never worked in a situation where her framework was used. But certainly in my doctoral program recently, I mean, if there's ever an example of a framework in the evaluation of teaching, it's always Danielson's
That's what it comes back to. Yeah.
And I loved her Madeline Hunter reference, and it made me feel like a total, come on, let me hear it, geezer.
Geezer.
Yeah, say it.
The Madeline Hunter lesson plan format.
Yes. It was called the developmental sequence of a lesson.
Oh.
Yeah, say that in your old man voice.
The developmental sequence of a lesson.
There you go.
I particularly keyed in on something she said about supporting and evaluating teachers, and she called it quality assurance.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's spot on, but I also think it wouldn't resonate with the teaching public at large because it sounds like cold terminology, industrial business-like terminology, quality assurance. But
quality assurance. Quality assurance is a very 1980s, 90s phrase.
But it
is. I mean, it's
accurate
Yeah,
as to
it's
what
totally
you're trying to
accurate.
do. We're trying to assure quality teaching, right?
Yeah.
But how do you make it, how do you frame it in a way and public relations it to make it more palatable? Or is that the problem? I don't know if it is the problem.
What are you, a softie?
A little bit.
I mean,
a little bit.
She's
Teaching's
basically
very
saying,
personal
but she's saying taxpayers need to be assured that their investment in public schools is there's a payoff.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and it comes back to some of the stuff we've talked about in the last month or so about the system is broken or not broken. You know, it's not really based on anything. You know, the people that come out and go, public education is broken. You know, I don't think it's like, oh, they have so many great data points and have been into so many schools. You know what I mean? It's all about the message that gets out and that you can sort of latch onto.
Right.
And so it
gets headlines.
Right. And so the flip side of that is, public schools are great.
Right.
You know? Yeah. The teachers are great.
Right.
The quality is sure. I mean, you wouldn't say that.
They have the QC sticker that gets stuck in your pants.
Yeah.
How fascinating is it that her framework evolved from really kind of she was working for testing.
Yeah.
And that you can see how the rubric and these very discrete things that teachers need to be able to do, know and be able to do. You can see how that evolved out of the work she was doing in the 1980s.
A very logical sequence.
Yeah, it's interesting that the Praxis 1 and 2 have become so widespread across the country, but I have never even heard
of the Praxis
3.
Yeah, I was.
I understand why it never went anywhere because of just the logistics of actually doing it from a federal or even a state level.
Much like John Saphir, she referred to clear definitions of teaching, of what teaching...
Common language.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, and she gave Madeline Hunter the props for that common language, and I feel old because that was I learned the Madeline Hunter way when I was trained to teach.
Oh, yeah?
It was pre-Danielson.
It is interesting that the common language theme has not caught on across the country. Or has it? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it has.
Really?
I don't feel like it has.
Regarding pedagogy?
Yeah, like to the level of skillful teacher or Danielson, like where they have very succinct terminology for things that are happening in the classroom.
Yeah, but so many systems use Danielson. I mean,
they do. I just don't. I don't know. Maybe it's just my feeling.
Well, the systems use it, but does that trickle down to teachers using the language?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
that's
I don't know
a fair
either.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, can I just say the real bomb that she dropped in that interview?
I know what you're going to say.
The principalship is an impossible job. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, caught me a little.
Like,
my mouth was agape. I didn't know whether to say yes, that's true.
But just the mix of the management of the school and the instructional leadership, and you obviously asked her quite a bit about that. It's and I think I need to think about it honestly a little bit. I don't know that I can come out and say, yeah, she's totally right, or like, no, like it's totally doable. It's just, it's a hot take, that's for sure.
And there's certainly been a lot of people that have said that teaching is an impossible job, but I don't know that I've heard a lot of folks bring it up that the principalship and leadership of a school is an impossible job. You don't, talk about Rahm Emanuel and not focusing on principles and leadership, but I think she made some very good points about the balancing of the principalship.
She did. I mean, a lot of what she said about how challenging the principalship it rings true to me. I just didn't hear about the role the principal plays in instructional leadership. I mean, she talked about PLCs and the role teachers play with each other, which is incredibly important, as Rick DeFore showed in all his work. But I didn't really get the feel for how she thought principals still play a key role.
I mean, maybe I'm assuming, but I think it was that teachers take that role. That's important. The teachers are leading the mutual learning amongst colleagues.
Right. So is that then to assume that principals have a limited role in it?
Or creates the conditions that allow teachers to learn
that
and
culture
take
piece.
Without like being the actual leader of the learning, creates the space.
Yeah, but I guess my follow-up was, but in systems where her framework has been used to create evaluation systems, who most often implements those? Principals, right?
Probably.
I mean, principals are largely responsible for evaluating teachers. Yeah,
you are, and I'm not to dig on you. I'm certainly not, but I'm saying, like,
yes, you are.
I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but
okay, here we go.
No, it's not.
I'm about to insult you.
No,
hold on.
It's not an insult. It's not an insult. I'm saying if you're out of the classroom for, let's say, 5 years.
Oh, there we go. It's the out of the classroom.
No, I'm not. I'm just trying to.
How long have you been out of the classroom?
I'm not.
3 years you've been out of the classroom?
You're such a jerk.
Okay, go ahead.
Such a baby. I didn't even get the I'm trying to soften the blow because you're so sensitive.
Okay. Well,
you're a sensitive millennial.
Okay.
I think there's something to be said about how much can you be, to what extent are you an instructional leader if you've been out of the classroom for 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years without having strong instructional leaders who are doing the work every day in the classroom with teachers. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just throwing it out there as something to consider. I'm thinking of folks that I work with who 3 years ago they were out of the classroom, and in the 3 years that they were out of the classroom, every school had Chromebooks put in, like a game changer of pedagogy.
Right.
Those 3 years lost.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you can't be an educational expert and you know the stuff that's going on.
Right.
But I'm just saying the further you're removed from the classroom and actually teaching.
I think it does affect sort of your day-to-day implementation of whatever. Because if you haven't done it, it gets a little rusty.
Right.
So
yeah, I agree. But I mean, I would argue that John Saphir has not been teaching for probably a pretty long time.
30 plus years.
Danielson hasn't either. But would you trust them to go into a classroom?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But I also, and in our discussions, when
observing is a separate set of skills in some ways than teaching is.
It is, and I will go back, and I wasn't insulting you. I'm saying that all the discussions that we had, when we worked together, was always in depth in terms of teaching and learning.
Right.
And there were always questions that you would ask.
Right.
That would probe my thinking and make me think differently about what I'm seeing in the classroom. So I'm not saying it's not relevant.
And listen, I buy what you're saying because it's the same for the principalship. It's the same for any position.
Right.
When you've been out of something, for folks that supervise principals, they're not principals anymore. So do you lose your fastball?
Yeah.
Because you don't do it? I think that's a legit question. Anyway, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Another educational giant on Ed's Not Dead.
More to come.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Krabs, for hooking us up with Miss Danielson.
Well done.
I do feel a little... Is it Dr. Danielson?
think it's Miss Danielson.
Miss
Yeah,
Danielson.
yeah.
Okay.
She's got a lot of
should've
degrees.
known that.
I'm not sure they were.
Yeah, I mean,
I looked because I was like, oh, I don't want to call her the wrong thing.
Yep. All right, folks. We'll be right back. Welcome back to episode 11 of Ed's Not Dead. Hey, boys.
Hey,
Hey,
All right.
I'm so excited.
We hope you enjoyed that musical interlude.
it's good.
It was
Such
so
a good Who was that band?
From the one and only Soul Witness. All right. It's been a great show. As always, we are brought to you by Pulp Education, specializing in leadership instruction and 21st century school reform and bad game shows from Mr. Sid.
Bad game shows. Quality game shows.
Before we go into that,
I am
can
not
Can I tell you a side
I'm
story?
not feeling
Let's
it
hear a
right
side story.
It's a side story about Soul Witness.
Oh, I like side
Soul
stories.
Witness.
All right, so we have,
Backstage.
yeah, this is behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes. Behind the music.
So we have
now. The VH1 special.
we have an organ player, right?
Yeah.
And last rehearsal, he was like, "Hey, like just to let you guys know, I'm going to be gone for like most of the summer." And I was like,
Whoa.
well, where are you going?"
You're out of the band, man.
He's gonna hitchhike around the country.
What?
Really?
Yep.
Is he going to send in his organ playing
No.
via satellite?
I think he's probably not going to be wearing shoes a lot.
Is he weighed down by familial obligations like you and me?
No, he's just a hippie, man.
Does he have
Wow.
Does he have a partner?
Yeah, she's going to stay behind.
Really?
He's
yeah.
hitchhiking.
Does he have?
Are you allowed to hitchhiking in the country? I don't think you're allowed to hitchhike.
Does he have offspring?
No, he's like 26 or something.
yeah.
He's
Young. I went
Does
across.
he have progeny?
I went across country when I was 25.
You had a car.
I did that. Yes, I did have a car. I did. I would not have. That's a little Brian McCandless.
Yeah.
Little into the wild.
And so we were
So
trying to.
doesn't eat bad berries in
Let's hope
Alaska.
not. So when he left, we were trying to make sense of it, and the guitar player had the best line. He said, "You know what, man? Hippie's got a hippie."
That's right.
It was like,
That's what you got to do.
it's really allowed me to accept it.
All right.
So he's
How
gonna do
old
it.
is he?
I think 26, 27. He's finding his way.
He's a young and
He's finding his way.
he's finding his way like
Yeah.
a good millennial, a second wave millennial.
He's at the end of the millennial.
He's a second tailwind.
I think they get. By the way, we haven't talked to. Speaking of millennials,
Oh, can we? You know, we did get one piece of feedback that I want to share with you guys.
when I think of
Did you-
millennials, I think of 1T
Well, that's what I'm saying.
because I think of young people, and then it makes me think of an old person.
so. I sent Mr. Patterson a tweet,
right,
direct message,
Right.
so it's private message, and it was about the Mueller investigation as usual.
yeah,
And I said, we've been trying to get together, like him and Mary Beth, and
Right.
we usually meet halfway. Sometimes we'll just have lunch or whatever. And he meant to reply to direct message.
I saw that. I was wondering what that was.
Oh, on
But
Twitter?
He made
He
made
tweeted
a
it out to
tweet,
everyone.
and I'll read it to
It also
to our
doesn't
listeners.
really make
That-
sense.
And he said, "Let's get a date. Do you want to come down or meet?" Because he lives in Delaware. April or May. If you visit, you can do stuff on your own some of the time, like bikes and beach. And then Andrew Kozlowski, Mr. Koz replied to him, and he goes, "Sounds good, Jim. Just send me the address." And he said, "Can't wait for Ed's Not Dead to see this. You're gonna get roasted big time."
we should all responded to that all.
I hope he
live.
responds with his address.
Said we would be
I
there.
definitely would put that.
He's never answered
on the
one of
show.
our phone
So
calls.
funny.
What a
He
He
so
is
good.
He's a good guy. That 1T. All right, what do you got for us, Mr. Sids?
All right. So since we just talked about some going to the picket lines with charter schools and teachers a little bit.
Yeah.
Yep. So there were 9 teacher strikes in 2018. Did you know this?
I did.
In
Yeah.
9 different states.
I can name them all.
All right. So that is your red light challenge today, gentlemen.
All right.
State, city, what?
Oh, I have to put a timer on.
I got
so just state.
why do we keep doing this game? I do better on multiple choice. When I actually have to name things, I do awful.
They're all very similar because they all ask for similar things.
Can we work collaboratively?
Yes.
Yeah, remember that's
Is that the? Is
That's
that
the
the?
we're
thing.
a team, man.
Your team. It's millennial
All right.
challenges.
All right,
ready?
ready,
One,
get set.
you have 1 minute. Ready? Go.
West Virginia,
Ding.
Oklahoma.
Ding.
California.
Nope.
Oh,
Oh, yes. Correct. Los Angeles.
just talked
Sorry.
about that.
Ding.
Tennessee,
Nope.
Arizona.
Yep.
Kentucky.
Yep.
How many's that?
That is 1, 2,
It's like 4.
3, 4, 5. You have 4 more.
4 more, man. Texas?
Nope. 30 seconds.
New Mexico?
No.
Washington.
No.
North Dakota.
No.
South Dakota.
No.
Alaska?
Illinois.
Missouri?
Virginia.
Yes.
Yes. Virginia?
VCU School for the Arts. 20 seconds.
North Carolina.
Ding.
Florida.
Not South Carolina. They don't have unions.
Florida. Can you say yes or no?
Ohio.
10 seconds.
Georgia.
Michigan.
Yes, Georgia.
Georgia.
Georgia, yes.
Wisconsin.
Ding, ding, ding. So you got all of them.
Yeah. Nice job, Mr. Graves.
All right.
All right,
So-
that was good.
Actually, did you say Kentucky?
No.
You didn't get Kentucky.
All right, read the list to us.
I said
All right.
Kentucky.
Oh, you did?
you did?
I
All
said
right.
Tennessee and then Kentucky.
Well, you got it. Great job. You get a trophy.
Yes.
So Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Kentucky.
I didn't say
Los
Colorado.
I
Angeles,
didn't say
California.
Colorado.
we missed Colorado.
Yeah.
Oh, my bad. I need to take better tolls.
Yeah.
Better notes. North Carolina, better tolls. I don't know. I'm thinking of tolls. North Carolina,
what is your-
Oklahoma, Virginia, and West Virginia.
What are you thinking about?
What is that? Come on, we
Easy
need to
pass?
explore that. What's a toll?
Tolls.
Get on the couch, man. Let's
So
talk.
uncomfortable.
You got to take the show. What's your problem?
I don't know what that was. It's
All right,
embarrassing.
I got to recover
Anyway,
from that.
So West Virginia was a statewide strike. Virginia was at the VCU School of the Arts, so not statewide. Oklahoma was statewide. In North Carolina, it was just numerous counties. Los Angeles was only a district-wide strike.
Oklahoma.
Kentucky was a teacher walkout in only some counties.
Right.
Georgia included. Actually, it had to do with bus drivers. A lot of bus drivers walked off the job.
That was a
Public
guess. That was a
schools.
guess on my part.
Yeah, it was good. Colorado, teacher strikes in numerous counties.
And
And
Denver
Arizona
just
had a statewide
just
strike.
happened. We should have gotten that one.
Well, that was 2019. This is 2018.
Ah,
Yes.
gotcha.
Oh, so that was recent.
Yeah.
And would California be considered 18 or 19?
Well, Los Angeles was last year, and they just had...
So LA was already.
Oakland is
Oakland is now striking, or was striking recently. Yeah.
I can't keep up with them.
Yep.
As our friend Randy Weingarten said to us, there'll be 5 more strikes before we talk
That's
about it.
right.
Right?
She did say that
She
to
did
us.
say that. Yeah. Well, that's as it should be. So teachers can get what they deserve.
Promote the public good.
right.
Absolutely.
It's more than just about getting what they deserve, but doing what's best for kids.
That's right. Promoting the common good
Yeah,
of public
and
education.
Have it. Yeah. Being able
All
to,
of that. Okay.
Yeah. Come
He
on.
made it
They
sound
want
a
to be able
little
to
selfish. Yeah.
buy a house and feed their kids.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay. Folks, thanks for tuning in to episode 11. Thanks to Charlotte Danielson for joining us. It was great, wasn't it, fellas?
It was great. Glad she was
Yep.
able to take the time to talk with
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. That's
In
another.
spite of the emergency vehicles going crazy outside of her abode.
Coming
Yeah.
to take her away.
If everything's fine.
Yeah, she was excellent. Please check out the story by Jay Matthews on charters versus unions.
We'll pop that into the show notes.
Yeah, Mr. Siddons will tweet that out as well. You can find me at RW Dodd, Mr. Crable at Peter Crable.
There you go.
I lost it for a sec. And at CH Siddons. Look us up on Facebook. You visit our website. We got any new blog posts up?
Got a couple in
Casey's
in
had
the
a couple
hopper.
in the works. He's not
you?
sending them.
They're just draft
me.
versions. I have 3 that are just in draft.
Oh, send them.
forms.
I have one
Send it
in-
to me.
I have an
I'll look at it.
outline.
Send it.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if it's
Let's
ever.
do it. Let's add to it.
What's it
Pop
called?
into
What's
the
it called?
folder.
What's it about? Before we go, 10 seconds.
It summarizes our philosophy. Ed's Not Dead's philosophy
Ooh.
that the demise of public education has been
Greatly overstated.
greatly overstated. Thank you. Yes,
Oh, look at that.
that
Cool.
public ed is alive and well.
All right, I like it.
Public Ed is alive and well.
Yep.
Title:
Ed's not dead.
Ed is not dead.
Ed's not dead. All right. So what do we got coming up on the show, Mr. Krabs?
Oh, nothing to preview. I got an email.
What do you mean? Randy Weingarten is coming.
Randy
up.
Weingarten. Yep.
Just
And
once we can get over our technical hurdles.
we had some
hurdles.
technical
hurders.
You can get over your tolls and hurdles.
technical hurders.
When we get a producer,
Yeah,
we'll have Randy on the show.
man. And I like spent all my mojo getting the last couple guests.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, I'm done.
I have to say that watching you two troubleshoot the technical problems tonight, folks, that you didn't have to see. I thought Mr. Siddons was going to have a meltdown,
freak out.
It was really good. Anyway, spread the word about Ed's Not Dead. Tell your friends, tell your family. Keep tuning in. Leave us some show feedback. Contact us. Give us ideas for the show. We want input from you. You guys are what makes it a special show by listening to us. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for joining us. Say later, guys.
Have a great night.
Later.